There's a pattern running through history that has taken down three global powers over the past 5 centuries. And in 2025, the United States is moving through that same sequence, step for step, choice for choice, as if we're replaying the exact script that ended in disaster every single time before. In 1590, Spain was the wealthiest empire on the planet. Half the world's silver and gold flowed through its ships. Its armies dominated Europe. Its currency was universal. 80 years later, it was bankrupt, reduced to a secondary state that never returned to greatness. In 1914, Britain controlled the largest empire ever recorded. The sun never set on its territory. The pound sterling anchored global finance. 4 decades later, the empire was dismantled. The currency crashed. Britain fell into the role of America's junior partner. In 1991, the Soviet Union stood as the other superpower. Nuclear arsenal, global reach, satellites across continents. It disappeared in just 900 days. Not from invasion, but from internal economic collapse. 3 examples. 3 dominant states. 3 total implosions, all following the same progression. And here's the part that should concern you. The United States has already moved through 5 of the 7 stages. We're not approaching the pattern. We're already inside it. This is how empires end, why they always insist they're different, and why the numbers say we're next. And it's unfolding faster than anyone is willing to acknowledge. But before we break down the pattern, you need to understand what imperial collapse actually looks like. Not in academic charts, but in real conditions. What it means when a superpower dies. It doesn't begin with invasion or defeat. It starts with economic exhaustion. The empire stretches past its ability to sustain itself. Bases in 150 countries, conflicts on multiple fronts, obligations it can't honor, debt it can't manage. At first, the decline hides itself. The currency still functions. The military still wins. The government still talks confidently. But underneath, the structure is deteriorating. Resources are misallocated. Productive output contracts, talent leaves. Then momentum shifts. Allies hedge their bets. Rivals push lines. Trade partners look for substitutes. Reserve currency status weakens. The very advantages that once defined power begin turning into liabilities. The currency once demanded globally starts returning home. A worldwide military presence becomes impossible to fund. Promises once backed by strength dissolve into empty statements. This isn't theory. It's exactly what happened to Spain, to Britain, to the Soviet Union. They made the same choices we're making now. They assumed their dominance was permanent. They stretched their militaries. They weakened their currencies. They ignored the warning signs until collapse was already in motion. So let's look at how the sequence played out 3 times in the same order with the same result. Let's begin with the first global empire, Spain in the 1500s and 1600s. This is the prototype. After Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, Spain rose as the world's first true superpower. They crushed the Aztec and Inca empires and gained control of the richest gold and silver deposits ever found. By 1550, Spanish galleons were carrying home around 200 tons of silver each year. By 1600, that figure had doubled to more than 400 tons annually. Spain effectively managed Europe's money supply. The Spanish real functioned as the world's reserve currency. Everyone wanted Spanish silver. And this is where the sequence begins, with a nation that commands the world's money and assumes that makes it untouchable. King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, held more wealth than any monarch before him, and he poured it into expanding the empire. Stage 1, military overextension. Spain was fighting everywhere at once, against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and Italy, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England at sea, plus campaigns in the Philippines and across the Americas. By 1580, Spanish forces were committed on 4 continents. The expense was overwhelming. Half of all state revenue went directly to the military, and even that wasn't enough. Stage 2, currency debasement. Taxes couldn't cover the empire's costs, so the crown turned to the same tactic every failing power uses. They downgraded the money. Silver coins were diluted with copper. Currency meant to be pure metal shifted to 50% copper, then 75%. The face value stayed unchanged, but the substance collapsed. By 1600, the coins contained almost no silver at all. Merchants refused them at stated value. Prices surged. Stage 3, the debt spiral. Spain borrowed relentlessly from Italian lenders, German lenders, anyone with capital. By 1557, not even 2 decades into Philip's rule, the state entered bankruptcy. They defaulted, restructured, and returned to borrowing. Another bankruptcy came in 1560. Another in 1575, another in 1596, 4 defaults in 40 years. Each time they vowed restraint. Each time they resumed the same cycle of spending and borrowing. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. This is the part most people misunderstand about Spain's fall. They possessed more gold and silver than any nation in history, and it ruined them. Because when money seems limitless, production stops. Why grow crops when imports are easy? Why build ships when you can simply buy them? Why push innovation when spending feels effortless? The Spanish elite viewed work as beneath their status. Industry weakened. Farming stalled. and the flood of wealth was immediately redirected to foreign goods. Silver from the Americas passed straight through Spain, paying for French wine, Italian silk, Dutch manufactures. Spain became a pipeline. Riches moved through it, but never stayed. By 1600, domestic production had nearly vanished. The empire relied entirely on imports, and entirely on silver to fund them. And when the mines declined, when output slipped, the structure supporting the empire collapsed. Stage 5. Social decay. As the economy unraveled, crime spiked. Beggars filled Madrid, productive citizens left. The most capable minds fled to France, England, the Netherlands, places building and expanding. Spain was left with officials, soldiers, clergy, consumers without creators. By 1640, Portugal broke away. By 1650, Spain lost the Netherlands, its most valuable possession. By 1700, the empire existed mostly on maps, large in theory, hollow in reality. A global superpower reduced to a secondary state in less than a century, never to return. Modern Spain is peaceful and cultured, but irrelevant on the world stage. The heirs of the conquistadors became a sightseeing stop. That's the end state of an imperial collapse. Now jump ahead 3 centuries. Britain in the 1900s, the empire where the sun never set. At its height, it controlled a quarter of the planet's landmass and governed 400 million people. The pound sterling served as the world's reserve currency. Major trade contracts were written in pounds. Central banks stocked British bonds. London stood as the financial capital of the world. And just like Spain centuries before, Britain assumed its dominance was permanent, but the pattern was already in motion. Stage 1. Military overextension. By 1900, Britain was tied to commitments across the entire world. India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. They were responsible for protecting territory on 6 continents. The financial burden was immense. And when World War I erupted in 1914, Britain confronted a decision. Stay out and watch Europe bleed, or enter the conflict and risk bankrupting the empire to secure victory. They chose to fight. The war cost Britain more than $40 billion, roughly $1 trillion in today's terms. They borrowed heavily, mostly from the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America billions. The global creditor had become the debtor. They won the war. They kept the empire. They believed recovery was possible. They were mistaken. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The pound sterling was meant to be backed by gold, but the war had drained Britain's reserves. They shipped gold to America to pay for weapons, food, and supplies. By 1920, reserves had fallen to half their 1914 level. Still, the government tried to maintain the pound's pre-war value. They reinstated the gold standard in 1925 at the old rate. The problem was simple. The pound was overpriced. British goods became uncompetitive, manufacturing contracted, unemployment rose. To defend the currency, interest rates had to stay high, crushing the domestic economy. By 1931, the pressure broke. Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound dropped 25% overnight. The world's reserve currency had openly admitted it could no longer uphold its promise. Stage 3. The debt spiral. Britain never recovered from the liabilities of World War I, and then World War II erupted. Another $120 billion in expenses. More borrowing from the United States. By 1945, Britain owed the US and Canada over $30 billion, more than the entire British GDP. The Allies had won the war, but the British Empire was effectively over. They couldn't defend it. They couldn't finance it. They couldn't hold it together. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1947, Britain relinquished India, the crown jewel and its primary source of wealth for 2 centuries. Over the following 2 decades, the rest fell away. Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean. By 1970, the British Empire survived only in archives and nostalgia. Stage 5. Currency collapse. The pound kept sliding. In 1940, 1 pound equaled $4.03. By 1950, $2.80. By 1970, $2.40. By 1980, $2.30. Today, around $1.27. The former global reserve currency had become a regional unit. Britain maintained the symbols, a permanent UN Security Council seat, nuclear weapons, a special relationship with America, but the reality was obvious. The empire was gone and everyone knew it. They became a former power, a museum of what once defined greatness. The empire was gone and it never returned. Now shift to the most recent case, the Soviet Union, from 1945 to 1991. After World War II, the USSR rose as a superpower. Nuclear arms, a massive military presence across Eastern Europe, satellites in orbit, and a conviction that they represented the future. Communism, they believed, would eclipse capitalism. The Soviet model would prevail. For 45 years, they challenged the United States, matched American military strength, and produced more tanks, more missiles, more troops. But underneath the surface, the system was already failing. Stage 1. Military overextension. The Soviet Union devoted 15 to 20% of its GDP to the armed forces, roughly triple America's share. They had to mirror U.S. technology, U.S. global reach, U.S. alliances, yet their economy was only a fraction of America's. They were fighting in Afghanistan, bankrolling Cuba, supporting Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia. Every place America had influence, they felt obligated to counter it. The burden was impossible to sustain. Stage 2. Economic stagnation. By the 1970s, Soviet growth had stalled. Oil revenue kept the system alive, but everything else was collapsing. Factories churned out low-quality goods. Agriculture failed repeatedly. Technology lagged by decades. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was importing grain, a nation with some of the world's best farmland unable to feed itself. The reason was structural. Central planning doesn't function. Innovation suffocates under command. Production collapses when no one has a reason to produce. Stage 3. Currency collapse. The ruble was never a true currency. It couldn't be exchanged internationally, and even Soviet citizens distrusted it. Whenever possible, they used U.S. dollars. The government had to purchase foreign goods with gold and oil because no one abroad would accept rubles. By 1985, oil prices fell. Gold reserves thinned. The USSR was running out of real money. Stage 4. Loss of empire. In 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. Eastern Europe broke away. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, gone within a single year. The satellite states that gave the Soviet Union strategic depth disappeared. Moscow couldn't stop it. They were financially exhausted. Stage 5. Complete collapse. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. 900 days from the fall of the Berlin Wall to total disintegration. No foreign invasion. No battlefield defeat. Just economic implosion. The military went unpaid. The government ceased to function. The ruble became worthless. A nuclear superpower with 30,000 warheads collapsed from internal financial failure. The pattern repeated itself. Overextension, currency failure, debt, loss of empire, collapse. And here's what should unsettle you. The United States is moving through the same sequence, stage by stage. Let's begin with stage 1, military overextension. The United States maintains more than 750 military bases across 80 countries, troops in 150 countries, commitments to defend Europe under NATO, defend Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, fight in the Middle East, counter China, counter Russia. The annual military budget is $850 billion, more than the next 10 nations combined. And it still isn't enough. We're stretched thin. Equipment is aging. Recruitment is falling. Obligations exceed capability. If China moves on Taiwan, if Russia pushes into NATO, if Iran closes the Persian Gulf, we cannot address all of it at once. We are overextended, just like Spain, just like Britain, just like the Soviet Union. Check. Stage 2, currency debasement. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window, turning the dollar into a fully fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has expanded by 400%. Since 2020 alone, more than $6 trillion have been created. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. We're not diluting metal in coins, we're creating unlimited paper. The method is different, the effect is identical. Debasement, check. Stage 3. The debt spiral. The United States now owes $36 trillion, roughly 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are nearing $1 trillion a year. We spend more servicing debt than funding the military. We run deficits annually, $1.8 trillion in 2024, even in economic expansion. In peacetime, we borrow simply to cover interest on past borrowing. That is the textbook definition of a debt spiral. Spain defaulted repeatedly. Britain borrowed until its empire broke. The USSR ran out of real money. We are moving down the same trajectory. Check. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. The United States no longer manufactures at scale. We design, we finance, we consume, but we don't produce. The industrial base has been hollowed out. Production shifted to China, Mexico, Vietnam. Every year, we import roughly $800 billion more than we export. We rely on foreign supply chains for nearly everything. Medicine, electronics, steel, even parts for our own military. Just as Spain depended on imports while silver drained outward, we depend on imports while dollars flow overseas. And like Spain, when that flow breaks, the system breaks with it. Check. Stage 5, social decay. Trust in institutions has collapsed to record lows. Crime is rising. Homelessness is exploding. Drug overdoses kill 100,000 Americans every year. The most capable workers are leaving or disengaging. Birth rates are falling. Political dysfunction is absolute. We can't agree, can't repair, can't build. The evidence of decline is visible everywhere, yet the country pretends it's manageable. It isn't. Check. We're sitting at stage 5 out of 7. The Soviet Union reached stage 5 before it disintegrated. Britain did too. Spain held out longer, but the trajectory was identical. We're not at the final step yet, but we're far along the sequence. Stage 6 is the loss of reserve currency status. That's when allies begin to diversify, when trade shifts to other units, when dollars surge back home because no one needs to hold them abroad. The early signals are already visible. BRICS nations building alternatives, central banks increasing gold reserves, China and Russia settling trade in yuan and rubles, Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. The first fractures are here. Stage 7 is collapse. Not a slow fade, but a rapid break. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existence in 900 days. Britain lost its empire in 2 decades. Spain needed more time, but the destination was the same. When the reserve currency fails, when debt can't be financed, when the military can't be sustained, the fall isn't gentle, it's sudden and severe. And those who insist it can't happen here learn the same truth every empire has learned. It can. And it does. 3 empires moved through this sequence: Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. Each believed it was unique. Each believed it was immune. Each believed the rules didn't apply. Every one of them was wrong. And we're repeating the same delusion today. We tell ourselves we're different. We have technology. We have the dollar. We're America. But the pattern doesn't care about identity. It follows math. You cannot outspend your income indefinitely. You cannot sustain an empire without production. You cannot debase your currency without consequence. And once stages 1 through 5 are complete, stages 6 and 7 don't disappear. They arrive. The sequence is fixed. The only unknown is timing. Maybe 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. But the pattern points to the same endpoint: collapse. And when it hits, it won't unfold gradually. It will break fast. A currency crisis triggering a debt crisis, triggering a political crisis. Overnight, a superpower becomes a warning. A reserve currency becomes a regional unit. An empire becomes a chapter in a book. It happened 3 times already. The pattern says, we're next. Since 2020, we've accelerated every stage. More money printed, more debt added, more global commitments, less production, deeper social fractures. We're not walking the pattern anymore. We're running through it. And if you understand the sequence, you can see exactly where it leads. Maybe we'll find an exit. Maybe America can do what Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union never managed. Maybe we'll reform, rebuild, recover. Maybe this time truly is different. But the pattern argues against it. The math argues against it. And history, which has watched empires fall in the same sequence again and again, says we're about to learn that truth the hard way. If this helped you see where we are in the cycle, subscribe. Because when stages 6 and 7 arrive, you'll want to understand what happened and why. The answers aren't hidden in the future. They're written in the past, and I'll show you where to look.